being said, there is a need for a grassroots opposition to this regime, for anything to be changed from inside. As long as that's not happening, yes, the nuclear facility will be bombed. Yes, the facilities of nuclear weapons will be gone. But one thing is going to be security forces, which we have to take it ourselves. Israel is not going to do it for us, neither America. Nobody's obligated to do that for us. We're obligated to do that for ourselves. So the grassroots movement against the regime are the real opposition of the regime, not some fake people online from LA speaking about our future. I just wanted to say that. I love you all, and I'm Israel Chai. Long live America and long live Kurdistan. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Hold on. Nima. Thank you. Rohan, are you there?
Certainly am. Hi, Jen.
I got your message. Did you want to do what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Look, we're going to sort of have a bit of a shift in the room at the moment. It's going to be on the same topic. This person who I will introduce shortly has been doxxed, has been labelled, has been tagged on Clubhouse as well. I'm going to play a clip. Hopefully the audio is going to be okay. It's from a space from Twitter X that was yesterday about US, Iran, and Israel and the current issues over there. This person's a member of the Healthy Debates community, as well as has a Clubhouse account. She was a special guest panelist alongside a national security expert, military expert, a political policy advisor, and a constitutional attorney as well. What I would like to do is play, I guess, some of the closing statement. It was basically a closing statement from the space from yesterday with the person's permission. Following me doing that, I'll open it up to questions. So bear with me for a second. I'll get the audio out. And JB, can you let me know if the audio is no good?
Absolutely.
Okay. Give me half a sec.
So far, no good.
Okay.
Countries in the Middle East, and it's failed every single time.
That's perfect, Rohan.
Allow Ozzy to speak, and we're going to wrap up here. She had some closing statements. We're going to wrap up. Thank you all for coming. Go ahead.
Thanks, Brian. As you bring this to a close, I want to sort of return to a principle that has always defined my perspective from the start. Context matters, and we started talking about this context in the beginning with the panel, not just in geopolitics, but in personal life. And it matters because false narratives, whether at a national or individual level, they do have real human consequences. And I think that's at the core of some of the question that sparked this whole panel discussion, Brian. Recently, I've been targeted by coordinated harassment. And I would say recent probably is in this year, in 2025, as early as January, February. I think a docs account that was created was put in the nest here that was launched in March. Chaos agents online have doxed me, circulated, manipulated falsehoods about my family, shared photos of my minor son, and that tweet, that page that is pinned to your nest over there, includes the photo of my son, who is a minor, and posted defamatory claims across platforms. I received death threats, I've had my privacy invaded, I've been falsely labeled as affiliated with the regime. Let me be very clear. These aren't just attacks on me. They're part of a wider effort to suppress any voices that don't fit neatly into this pre-approved narrative that occurs in this box that we want. And we saw indications of it with different speakers on the panel and the diversity. And I appreciate what Malcolm had said earlier, what Dr. Strange just said, and many others. In response to this, I'm just going to say this once and for all on a recorded space. Multiple U.S. federal agencies, including the FBI and others that have been investigating these for decades, since 2021 and 2022 when it happened, where I received boxes and packages at my home and my office and my family members. They're and to bring Iran to the secular democracy that Hunter was talking about, that was the intention of the revolution at some point. One often overlooked but deeply important part of his legacy is that he did play a direct role in helping secure the escape and safe passage of individuals who were on execution's list, including Jewish Iranians, religious minorities. In fact, it's also documented that he supported a movement to bring to the forefront the persecution of Baha'is in Iran and others at risk in the immediate aftermath of the revolution. It's important to say this clearly from me, because some of the current doxing and coordinated harassment that I face that you all witnessed is rooted in a very deliberate effort to manipulate Jewish communities into hating me by spreading categorically false narratives about my grandfather and my family and who I am as an individual. Not who my grandfather was, not who my father was, but who I am. But the reality is facts matter, and so does historical integrity. And the historical integrity is extremely important, especially when we're talking about this stuff. Brian, you started talking about the Tucker Carlson interviews. We've seen Tucker Carlson even interview Dan Caldwell talking about the United States, in this constant history of regime change wars. Now, it's also true that my grandfather worked with a wide range of political actors during his time, and back then, including Yasser Arafat, which is also used as a stick to hit me on the head with. At the time, in the revolutionary context, because context matters, in the revolutionary context of the late 1970s, he and many others believed that such alliances were part of building solidarity among national liberal movements. However way you want to look at it now in 2025, in the 70s, we all have to admit that it was a time of just revolutionary. We saw protests in America about different issues. We see them now still. Hindsight is always 2020, and like many historical figures, his choices reflected the climate of the revolutions at that time, where strategy and morality were often in tension. That doesn't mean I disavow that part of his record. I simply understand it for what it was, shaped by the urgency, chaos, and hope of that time. History is full of leaders who, with good intentions at that moment, made choices that today we might approach differently. And the decisions that are made today, we might look at in 10 years or 20 years and think we could have approached them differently. What has moved me most in all of this, even amidst the smears, is that people across political spectrums, including monarchists, have reached out with kindness and shared their respect for him. One recurring things that they've told me: your grandfather once said, our biggest mistake during the revolution was saying, Khabat Shah Bere, and in English that translates, let's just get rid of the Shah, and we will take care of the rest later. This reflection haunts me and many others, because I hear the same dangerous rhetoric now. Let's just get rid of this regime and we'll figure out the rest later. And if we're not careful, we're repeating the same mistake, in my humble opinion. And it won't be academics or activists who pay the price. It'll be, once again, everyday ordinary Iranians and voices like those that we heard on this stage. So no, I am absolutely not part of any regime. I've lived my entire life in the United States. I care about Iran as my family's heritage, but I don't live there, and it's not for me to decide its future. That is for the people of Iran to determine, and Malcolm said it best when he was here earlier.
Is that it, bro?
I also care deeply about this country that I live in.
Almost done.
I care about American service members. I care about my friend who served in special operations, deployed last minute to Afghanistan to evacuate troops under the most impossible conditions. I care about friends who fought ISIS across multiple tours, only to now see some of the same figures they fought being rebranded and repurposed as political allies or presidents. That kind of narrative, whiplash takes a toll. Our military may continue to do what it's asked of them, but the public's trust in why is breaking down. And narratives around Iran and Israel right now are feeding that mistrust. That brings me to something I deeply appreciated on this panel, especially Malcolm's thoughtful comments on polling.
love. I just want to say, Miriam, I'm sorry. I had no idea that you went through all that, and I'm glad you're here. Rohan,
I'd like to maybe introduce this person on her terms, finally. After spending a long time in hiding, she's chosen to be able to take this opportunity right here and now, not just to be able to speak her piece, but to be able to have her face seen. I want to welcome Miriam.
Hi, Rohan. Hi, JB and everyone.
I must say, when I heard your closing statements, I was absolutely blown away. Not just by what you were saying, but also how you were saying it so eloquently and how succinctly as well. I've been privy to having an element of exposure to what your history has been, and you've held that in confidence with me, and I have held that and made sure that it's on your terms when and if you ever wanted to be able to talk about what your history is, what your family has been through, and it's your turn to be able to shine. So I'd like to know, first of all, is there something you'd like to be able to add to what's already been said? Are there any particular parts of what you've said that you'd like to be able to maybe focus on the conversation? And also, would you be open to having a Q&A in some way, shape, or form?
Very supportive. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the respect for my privacy, not just from you all, but from so many other friends, some here, some not. So I want to first say thank you about that. And to navigate, sharing my voice, there's so many, it's very complex, it's a delicate dance between saying the right thing, saying what I believe, standing 10 toes down on something, and then also navigating the, I guess, hate or whatever you want to call it, from all sides actually, from the regime side, from the diaspora side, from all sides. And I think yesterday I just got to a point thinking about what's going on with Israel and Iran, this war, civilian deaths, casualties of war, the nuances of war, all of these things going on, framed around talking points, from people above a glass ceiling that it's very, very hard to access, right? There's so many people at that level that are making decisions that impact all of us every day. So yesterday was a moment that I just felt like it was time to just kind of come out there. And even on X, I'm very low key. I don't really engage in stuff. And so when Brian Allen approached me and said, "Hey, I want to put together this panel," Alan Ayer was there. Malcolm Nance is very well known. He was in the military, served multiple tours. He was there. We had a constitutional attorney there. Another Brian was there, and he's a policy advisor. So it was a good, healthy panel of different people, different backgrounds. And so the conversation was framed around a lot of this stuff going on. And the premise of it was based off truth and the integrity of truth and the integrity of facts, whether they're uncomfortable to talk about, whether they fit the narrative that we want individually, collectively, in our silos, in our groups. I sat here listening a little bit about, I think there was a Kurd that was speaking. I'm probably known and obnoxiously known for this, that I always give grace to everybody for their lived experiences, and I think there's truth in that. So it's very complex, and we have to acknowledge the complexity of everything going on. We have to acknowledge the fact that while Iranians and dissidents and political prisoners and those inside of Iran or outside of Iran that have fled, while they have disagreements or flat out hate the regime, there is a sense of solidarity and national pride and love for their nation, and they don't want to see this happen this way. And that's important to note, because in these kinds of environments of social audio where we're discussing and we're trying to unpack reality, it's very easy to become a you versus us, them versus me,
and this narrative of like pointing people and putting them in boxes and labeling them if they don't subscribe to a singular sentence or a claim or a position on something, because it's very nuanced and it's very complex. And then we've got the diplomacy side of it, and we've got the chronological timeline of things. Those facts mean something. They are not just something to use to say, oh, you're whitewashing this, or you're justifying this, or you're trying to protect this narrative. This isn't a Iran versus Israel thing. This isn't a U.S. versus Israel thing. This isn't a U.S. versus Iran thing. This isn't anything versus anything. It's about how we are unpacking, dissecting, maneuvering historical facts with accuracy and respect, whether that fact is uncomfortable. So I just want to appreciate and say thank you for all of that.
Pleasure. Look, I just want to highlight one of those things, one of the issues that you just brought up, and that is that a lot of people look at these types of scenarios in the same sort of framing as a game of soccer or a game of football. It's one team versus another. You're either on one side or you're on the other. There's conversation, and you do it in such a very eloquent way. At the same time as you have your truths, there are other people who are going to have their truths, their lived experiences, and they're living through the filter that they have adopted based on their bias or their own personal experience as well. So with that, look, I want to ask, is there anybody who'd like to be able to ask any questions to Merrick?
Yes.
Okay, who've we got that?
Dave, yeah. So what?
Hi, David.
Yes, I think in this clubhouse, I think we need to gradually transition to truth and embrace complexity. I mean, most Western people have no clue how complex this region is. And the problem is for...
David, I'm going to pause you. Sorry, mate. Are you going to ask her a question directly about what she...
Yeah, I will just answer the question.
That'd be great.
So you, Mariam, thank you. And you mentioned about all this complexity. How would you help the Western people to deal with this complexity, go through the truth? Because since October 7, we... without many Westerners are very lazy and without putting effort, just come and black and white, because they are bombarded with a lot of misinformation from people who are pro-Palestine, and there are certain complexity as well with the struggle between pro-Palestine and Israel. But very often we find that there's a lot of misinformation to go through the history. There's always a debate between which version of history is true. So I'm asking you, Maria, if you are representing Kurt, how would you help us to go through the complexity and let the truth prevail?
Hi, Dave, I appreciate that question. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. It requires intellectual honesty and not being lazy. Unfortunately, sticking to talking points, jumping on bandwagon legitimacy, not making the effort to understand the chronological order of things, why something happened when it happened, what are the nuances of how it happened, when it happened. We are, I think recently they put out a stat that said the average, attention span is like 8 seconds, right? So I appreciate everybody for listening to a 10-minute statement from me, but we have to be able to pause a little bit and make the effort to learn, to read, to understand things more. Because if we don't, and we stick to 8-second talking points and headlines, and we jump on those statements, we are really missing it all. We are not able to discern the truth and the reality and the facts, and that is going to continue to cause division. It's going to sow hatred. It's not, and this applies to Israel and Palestine situation here too.
every side has its own justified lived experiences and stories, right? And I'm going to repeat it again. We're at the mercy of people who make decisions claiming it's on our behalf, and we are not sitting at that table, right? We can hear about it, we read about it in the news, but we're not sitting there. And the only way to get close to a seat at that table is to read as much as we can, to learn as much as we can, and understand the history and the nuances and how complex it is. So I appreciate your question, and I just encourage everybody to read more, listen more, talk more, understand more.
Do you appreciate perhaps what it's like for a person who doesn't have as much insight knowledge to current events as well as the history of the region, how it might be somewhat confusing, as an example, that you have 80% of the population, I think it's 90 million in Iran at this point, who are against the current regime, who would want a change of the guard. And there are people who are literally partying in the streets. I've seen videos of people celebrating, saying thank you Israel, blessing Israel. I've seen people around the world, in America, also in Australia, out in the streets, showing appreciation for Israel doing what they're doing at this point. For probably a variety of different reasons, but I would sort of ascertain that the main reason why they're doing that is because they do want to change the regime. And you also bring up some salient points in terms of, well, what happens after this? If there's nothing that's put in place, then if there's no after plan, then it seems to me that you think that things would actually get worse than what they currently are and not better for the people of Iran. And I'm not sure I quite understand that. Is it possible to be able to maybe shed some light on that for us?
Sure. So I'll start from the beginning of what you brought up. I think, I mentioned this in my closing statement, and I'll sort of repeat it here. And this goes for polls, but it also goes for, social media videos and posts that we see everywhere that is framing our perception. Polling gets cited when it's convenient and dismissed when it's not. The same applies to social media posts and videos coming out of Iran. For every one Iranian celebrating this, I guarantee you that there's an Iranian not celebrating this. There's an Iranian that says, hey, and I think I've sent you some pictures before, the screenshots from, there's a Baha'i activist who just happened to do a seminar, a conference, a speaking engagement about a week or two ago in Dallas. Even for that person who's been persecuted, family persecuted, sharing his lived experience in a story to amplify the voice of Baha'is in Iran, for example, their story, right? I'm not judging its truth or not. I'm not judging anything about it. That is their story. It is not my place to judge. But even those people are saying, hey, this is not what we wanted. This is not how we want it. So for every person who's celebrating it, I think it's fair to say that there's a person not celebrating. And it goes back to the agency of its people. Regarding the after, what happens next? The issue that I see is that we are siloed and fragmented still as an Iranian community inside and out. You cannot convince me that there is a singular majority voice that transcends beyond any other minority groups, siloed groups. Everybody is operating with their own vision. You've got the group here that is a hardcore, die-hard monarchy group. You've got the group here that says, hey, for this portion of transition, for this next phase, we're going to support Reza Pahlavi as leader. You've got another group here saying, no, we support Maryam Rajavi and her 10-point plan. In fact, to the point where, in my humble opinion, Reza Pahlavi is $1 short. Congress has already, said, hey, we're recognizing this as Maryam Rajavi. But that's another argument. You've got Kurds, you have Kurd separatists that are expansionists, not just separatists, but it's the expansionism side of it. You've got Kurds that are nationalists that want a Kurdish state within the state of Iran as its own autonomous area like you see in Iraq. You've got reformists. You've got people that are reformists by political affiliation, and then you've got reformists who philosophically believe in the engine, like the process of reform, like we see in the United States, and I probably fall somewhere around there. And then you've got, your regime supporters that are diehard regime supporters, and then you've got loyalists, then you've got your hardline conservatives, and then you've got a whole bunch of people in the middle that are just afraid, like, what the hell's going to happen? I don't even know what I want to do right now. I just want to go to work. I want to be able to feed my family. I want to live my life. Like, please, everybody, just leave me alone. So when you have an environment that is so diverse and complex, politically, socially, emotionally, historically, it's very hard to say that right now we're going to have a unified process about what's going to happen next. And the reason I'm highlighting this, Ro, is because, in 120 years of Iran's history, we have had 5 regime changes. 5 in 120 years. Tell me which nation in the world has had that much regime change in 5 years and able to sustain itself. So that perspective and what I'm saying about what happens next is very, very important, because if we don't recognize this, there's always going to be another group that is going to rise up, and we're going to have the 6th or the 7th or the 8th regime change, and we're not even going to hit 200.
I hear what you're saying. JB, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Miriam. Listen, I'm hearing things from the fact you had experience. I'm sure it's extremely stressful. But you're getting a lot of pushback in the chat on some of the things you're saying. I'm not a scholar on anything that deals with Iran, to be honest. I'm learning things today. So, Sarah, did you want to jump in? I know Sam, you do?
I do. I want to ask Mariam something, because she said something, but I'm not sure if I heard it correctly or not. Mariam, did you say, when you were talking right now, did you say that your family did work for IRGC at some point?
No.
Oh, you did not say that. Okay.
I said I categorically deny that accusation. That is completely false.
Okay, but I do want to say something, and Mariam, please don't take this in the wrong way. I do like you. We're friends on, Clubhouse. But for someone who always say, as an Iranian who lives outside Iran, it's not my place to decide for the future of Iran. You have a lot of opinion on why it's dangerous and there's going to be civil war. Like, you literally had the longest mic in all the people who talked in this room today. So I just want to point that out, and I'm not like labeling you anything, whether you truly believe that the stuff that you're saying or not. You are actually playing in IRGC's favor. And again, I'm not saying you are connected to them, but I just want to let you know, like, I swear I have at least 20 people in my back channel right now, and they're all saying, is she IRGC? Is she IRGC? Why is she saying this? Like, seriously, like, if you want to tell Iranians that those who are outside the country shouldn't have any opinions, or you're not going to have opinion, you're not going to decide for the future of Iran, I think you shouldn't, like, have this much of explanation either, because you know what makes you an Iranian? It doesn't matter if you live inside Iran or not. The same way that Iranians can go and actually vote for presidential, whether they're inside Iran or not, they can have an opinion. Majority of Iranians who are outside Iran, they had to run from the IRGC at some point in their life. So they actually absolutely have the right to have an opinion. Every single Iranian has a single vote. And if you don't want to be involved, then please, I beg you, and I beg you on behalf of every Iranian who's anti-regime and they want them to go, please just sit quietly back, because you always have a lot of opinion, but then you always also say, oh, I'm not going to make decisions. That's all I just wanted to say, and I hope you don't take it in the wrong way. I'm not trying to label you. I'm saying it as a friend.
Okay. So I'm going to start by saying there's 2 types of people: glass half full and glass half empty. Your perception is your reality. So I can't change the minds of anyone who wants to take what I said and hear how they wanted to hear it. I said what I said very, very clearly. Okay, so I'm not going to go back and forth about, trying to debate or defend my statements. I was very, very explicit with how I said it, how I framed it. So there's always going to be a group of people who just don't want to hear what somebody's saying for what it is.
Rohan, I'm going to hand the room over to you since you're the administrator for this house. Great conversation, guys. I'll be back.
See you back here soon, JB. Sarah, look, I just want to say thanks for making the comment, also asking the question so politely as well. I think we were pointing out before that, like, Miriam's going to have, she has her scope of the situation that she's going to be able to talk about. She's got a narrative based on her own personal experience and also the history that she has not just witnessed for herself but also has read about as well. And I think, look, within this, there's a healthy conversation and, for that matter, a healthy debate to be able to have. I'd like to know if there's anybody else who's...
Sano, go ahead, Sano.
Yeah, I don't know this lady, I don't know Mariam, but I think, if I understood correctly, she's the daughter of Ibrahim Yazdi. Well, Ibrahim Yazdi was not a very good actor. Even after revolution. Granddaughter. Well, Ibrahim Yazdi, he was not a very good actor. He was not a very good actor, good figure in the history of Iran. Well, he fought for the Islamic Revolution. He was pro-Islamic Revolution, but he also became a victim of Islamic Revolution. So among all the hundreds of thousands of the victims of Islamic Revolution, Ibrahim Yazdi is one of the people who I feel sorry for the least, because he was one of the culprits who brought this pestilence to our country. And so just my question is, so Mariam, if I understand correctly, you oppose regime change in Iran right now. So is it because Israel is involved? Is it because of your hatred for Israel that you are opposed to it? Or is it because Pahlavi is involved? For which of these two reasons is that you are against? Is it because of your hatred for Israel or your hatred for Pahlavi? Judging from the views of your grandfather, because I don't know your own view.
That's really interesting. I don't know where you got the idea that Mariam is anti-Israel, or even for that matter pro-IRGC, but Mariam, if you'd like to be able to respond to that, it's entirely up to you.
I think you, as
opposing regime change right now is pro-IRGC.
Supports Israel.
Wait.
Cleared it up.
Pause for 1 second, okay. Just for what it's worth, we've got a one mic policy. B, if a moderator is talking, that's not an indication to be able to open mic and just talk over them. That's not a good idea. We're not going to accept that. Sorry, Mariam, as you were saying?
I was just saying that as a Jewish man who supports Israel, I think it's fascinating from the outside in this current climate of trying to label people a certain way and I said it actually when you played my statement in the space. I think the question was cleverly worded, but I think you responded to it well, Ro. So I'm just going to leave your statement, if you want to repeat it again, out there for people to really understand the perception of what I said, how you took what I said, listening very carefully, how you said as a Jewish man who supports Israel, and what somebody like Sano is trying to paint what I said.
Sano, I don't know how you came to the conclusion that Mariam is anti-Israel and pro-IRGC. Is it possible you've misheard something?
No, I'm just asking. I'm not saying she's anti-Israel. I'm just asking, why would she be against regime change after a historical opportunity we have? We don't have the luxury of choosing exactly how to carry out regime change. And if this fails, then there will be massive massacres. There will be tens of Khabarans. If you're Iranian, you know what is Khabaran. What is the mass murder of political prisoners in the 80s. There will be tenfold of that awaiting us if this regime change attempt fails. So why would anyone be against regime change now? just because it is not exactly the way I dreamt it to be.
Well, I mean, maybe a way
So,
of putting it would be, Miriam, do you think that under the current circumstances, if there was a regime change, could it actually be any worse than what it currently is?
Hey, Miriam, in the midst of you answering that question,
Hang on for a second. Anthony, I
It's
just
okay,
want to see if
Yeah, Ro, I would actually like to also hear what Anthony wants to kind of say too, so I can answer it all together, if that's okay with you.
yeah, okay, that's
excellent. So Miriam, I just want to be clear, right? Do you think it's a fair stance for someone to feel if you're anti-regime change, that makes Miriam pro, IRGC? Do you think that's a fair statement?
If Miriam actually explicitly says she's against regime change, I'm sure that there's somebody out there that could take that and make 2 + 2 = 4 in that context. But I'd like anyone here, I charge anyone, to tell me where in any of my statement or anything else that I said assert that I am anti-regime change. Please. And Rose heard the video. Ro played the video. Ro, did I say anything anywhere that I'm anti-regime change at all?
no, you
Explicitly
certainly, and
or
I've
even
never heard,
imply it in the slightest?
no, there was no implication whatsoever. It was an assumption that was being made and an assertion that came as a result of that, much the same as the assertion that you're anti-Israel, which I've known you on here for I don't know how long, but I've never heard you be anti-Israel once.
So to be clear, Miriam, I haven't heard you say anything that indicates that you're anti-regime change. I was just asking the question as a concept. It's not based on something you said. Multiple people have asserted that you're anti-regime change. I haven't heard you state that.
I would like to say something. Is it okay? So from what I hear so far, this is more about ancient people, Kurd. They are divided now in Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran, right? Most of them are in Turkey. What I hear from Marian is there's a lot of complexity. The history timeline is very important. And she just hoped that in this discussion of how the regime change will take place, that people do not totally ignore. There is this, 8 million Kurds in Iran, but she hoped for the bigger picture. What would the world want to do with people Kurds? There are distributed around 14 million in Turkey, 8 in Iran, and some in Iraq, and some a little in Syria. I think that's what I hear from her. And I rather hear things like that, which is based on truth, than having many Israeli people wasting time on daily basis, debating futilely with people like Aziz, or people who just come and waste the time of the Israeli people. We hope for IRGC to go away. And the question is, in this very sensitive, uncertain time, should we hear about, the future of Kurd, right? But if this is presented as a truth, and if there's no misleading, everything is clear that she's not representing Kurd who's and thinking about anti-Israel, I don't hear that, and I also don't hear that about anti-regime change. She just hoped that there is this truth in history. What would happen to these people when there's an anti-regime change? When there's a regime change, and also the other point, what she say is, who is going to lead the regime change? She believes, maybe it's not her or somebody else. It's the Kurd people who's going to lead the regime change. They are willing to sacrifice their life. Again, I could be wrong, but she's not anti-regime change. She just hopes in this very historical moment in Iran, people don't forget there is an 8% Kurd death. That's my point of view.
Mariam, did you want to follow up with that?
Sorry for interrupting. Well, sorry,
Let
Mariam.
me clarify,
Look,
Sarah.
there is a-
Sarah, hang on. Let me clarify.
No, there is a guy in the chat who's like making very, very nasty comments. Maybe somebody wants to.
It's okay. I see it, but I think it's also important to see that it exists there, Sarah Jo. Okay, because that is also telling. Again, we're talking about complexities of all of this. There are people out there who make the statement, nuke Iran, right? I mean, they even create an account about it. We can disavow it, we can get upset about it, but we can't ignore that it exists, in my humble opinion. To answer Dave, I think I understand where you're coming from with the whole reliance on the Kurd part and bringing that. I didn't say definitively that it's Kurds. I said in response to Ro, when he asked me about this, I said that the complexity of it does cause a concern for me looking at it from the outside based off of 120 years. So when you have a population of Iranians globally, 80 plus million inside, and you have so many different factions and people that are subscribe to a different type of political affiliation or ideology, it begs the question, where's the utopia? Where's that utopian leader or group of leaders? If you really want my opinion, I think that the leaders of Iran are in those jails. I think that the dissidents and the political activists that have given their blood, sweat, and tears and have stayed in the country and have fought against the government, those people, to me, in my humble opinion, are the ones that are truly the ones that can navigate all of this, because even sociologically or psychologically, they've earned the respects of their compatriots inside of Iran enough because they see them that have stayed there. Whether we on the outside have different judgments and opinions about them and we want to go down conspiracy rabbit holes or affix a label to them, regardless of what we think on the outside, the people inside of Iran, they recognize who's in prison right now. So that's where I'll land on that part, Dave. And that's what I was trying to explain, is there's a complexity there of all the different.
Let me chime in here with a quick question. I think the commentary in the chat, and you referenced it, Miriam, begs a provocative question. And I'd like for you, if you could, to answer it directly. The question is this: do you think that Iran should have nuclear weapons? And if so, or if not, why or why not?
That's a great question, TC. That was actually a question we were talking about yesterday, and I've been on different panels talking about this. On principle, I think every sovereign nation has the right to do that. The issue about Iran having nuclear capabilities started actually in the late 1960s and 1970. So during that time, there was Project Flower. You had the Shah of Iran back then, the late Shah, asking the United States for the ability to develop a nuclear program. The question right now is, do we trust this regime enough to have a nuclear program? My question to that is, what type of government would anyone trust to have a nuclear program? And the foundational principled question is, does every sovereign nation have the right to do it, right? Have the right to have it? And so if you look back at the history of Iran, it's not exclusive to 46 years, this question about nuclear programs, nuclear reactors. The Shah of Iran had a program to have 22 or 23 nuclear sites. Before Ford was Nixon. Nixon said, okay, let's work on an agreement. Let's talk to each other about this. So they had that. Then you had the Guadalupe conference that happened. In the middle of that, you had Ford come in. So the complexity and the accuracy of the chronological timeline of all this lends itself to the question of, when will the West, or anyone in general, be satisfied, and what regime will be satisfied for something like this to happen? So on principle alone, yes, I believe that Iran has the right to have the same things that Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Israel, America, every other country has. I would be a liar if I said that I didn't agree on that. So I'll leave it there.
If I could just follow up on that, if I can just follow up on that real quick, and I'll hand it right back off to you.
Yeah, sure. I think I know where you're going to go with it.
Yeah. Don't take this the wrong way, Miriam. But I asked you to answer the question directly because I wanted to
evoke a response to the question that's guided the conversation, which is, what is the utility of a nuclear-armed Iran? We're not talking about nuclear energy. I'm talking about a nuclear bomb. And so the question was, in your opinion, should this current regime have a nuclear bomb? And if so, why? And I think you gave a principled response, which I respect, and I can respect that response, because if everybody else is entitled to it, then why shouldn't Iran be entitled to it? That's fair. But considering the implications of this current regime armed with a nuclear weapon, I guess agnostic to any type of like principled or, just principled stance on the issue of fairness and equity for countries having access to weapons that other countries have, why would it be advantageous for this regime of Iran to have a nuclear bomb? If you want to answer that, you can. If not, no worries. But
I'll answer it. I'll answer it, but I'm not going to be direct the way that you want, okay, TC? Because I think it requires a little bit of background. Yeah. So I'm gonna speak as an American citizen here. My statement before was as an American citizen, and also pride in my heritage and the fact that Iran does deserve this. And this has been a question since I said from the late 1960s and 1970. There's been a lot of talk about JCPOA, right? So when the U.S. backed out of JCPOA, although Iran was still in a nuclear agreement with the E3 nations, France, Germany, UK, there were some agreements there. It got out of hand. So Iran went from 3.67 to 60%. That's a big jump. Okay, I think we can all agree that shouldn't have happened, and I think the regime was stupid for allowing that to happen. So I don't agree on that. I don't think they should have done that. Then you've got the IAEA. They say that, there's conflicting statements. In one breath, you've got, it's going to happen within the next 3 weeks, three months, etc. But then you've got the definitive statement from the IAEA saying that Iran is not building a bomb and is likely not to in the next 3 years away, even if it wanted to. Okay, so even if it chose the path to develop a nuclear bomb, it hasn't indicated so, but what they have right now could if they wanted to, right? So that's a question, that's an issue. But right now, in terms of policy and the U.S. position on this and what we're doing here in the U.S. domestically, the question is, it's at least 3 years away. We've had so many conflicting reports from, you've got, the Director General Grossi, he came out and said something, and then he had to walk that back. I think 2 days ago, he was on the TV doing an interview, walking back what he said. There's so many layers to all of this. So given this current regime, the way that they have behaved, I think it's fair for any Western country to say, hey, hold on a second here. Like, what are you doing? Why do you need 60%? So I think that's a fair question to ask. And as from this position, from a policy position, looking at that, I would also say, why are you guys enriching this much? I agree with the sentiment that we should be concerned with what they're doing with that. So I'm not disavowing any Western perspective on our opinion of Iran's ability to have it with this regime and the statements that they've made. And I'm not talking about domestic. I'm talking about, when it comes to like their foreign relation policies.
So in a nutshell, given the current regime, would you feel comfortable as a person who's living in Israel for them to be able to have developed nuclear capabilities further than what they have?
That's a good question, Ro. Given the asinine statements from our former president, Ahmadinejad, and, some of the rhetoric around there that's really escalated the whole, Iran versus Israel thing, I can see why Israel would not feel comfortable. I could see that. I respect the position of Israel saying, hey, we're not comfortable with Iran having this because, ever since Ahmadinejad opened his stupid mouth, this is what he said.
I want to get in.
That was answering the question, but not the question that I was asking. would you feel comfortable
She's good at that, bro. She's good
as a
at that.
person? Hang on for a second. Would you, as an Israeli, feel comfortable with Iran or IRGC developing a greater strengths of uranium?
As
Up to 60
if I was an Israeli, I would not feel comfortable if I was an Israeli.
Okay. You understand that obviously Israelis need to be able to take matters into their own hands, and given the threat that the IRGC has made and the Ayatollah has made towards Israel, and it's not just this particular one, and it's not just in the last week or the last couple of months, but this has been something that's happened over decades, as you're well aware. There's been a constant threat to Israel coming from Iran, not just directly, through its proxies as well, through the funding of Hamas, through the funding of Hezbollah, through the PIJ, through Houthis, which are also causing major problems within the water boundaries for shipping and so forth, which is causing problems for the rest of the world. We're also aware that the funding the Houthis, where you get, it sort of surprises me that I'm not hearing a direct.
Can I tell you why?
I'm not hearing a direct sort of an emphatic answer that leans in the direction of saying absolutely not. Actually, this regime is a fucking danger to the rest of the world. In fact, it's a cancer, and is a threat to not just the Middle East but also the world peace.
Sir, I'm going to tell you why, Ron, and it's really simple. For me, statements like that and words like that matter, right? There's value that we assign to it, and that value that we assign to it goes into a formula that then turns into an action, right? So let's talk about threats, and let's talk about relationships and who hates who, and I'm saying who in terms of a nation, right? There's another country out there, Pakistan, who actually has the atomic capabilities to do something. And if we look at the history of Pakistan and Israel, Pakistan, you could say, and I'm using air quotes here, hates Israel just as much, right? What I don't see, and this is where I'm trying to reconcile this narrative, and maybe we can have an honest conversation about this so that I can get to the point where you guys are and I can be on the same level. But for me, pragmatically speaking, and words matter to me, what I don't see is the consistency of that message in terms of threat and fear. So we have a country, Pakistan, that literally today hasn't talked about, to the point where in the last 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, right? Let's just say in the last week, you've heard statements from Pakistan. They walked back those statements. They said it again the next day, where they are willing and able to support, has the capability and has made that claim, and since at least 1948 has been anti-Israel. So if somebody could help enlighten and share that perspective of it, for me to align the two principles.
Can someone else speak?
Yeah.
Aside from Mariam, with all due respect.
Pakistan was not funded for a second. Why are people just jumping in? Just hang on for a second. Yaakov, I've got you. Just let Mariam finish what she was saying. I also want to be able to point out that the Ayatollah is the person, or the IRGC has been very open and verbose in terms of its desire and its intention, and its actions through its proxies in the wanton destruction of Israel. Pakistan, albeit has like an incredible arsenal of nuclear capabilities and weapons, has not done that. So they haven't openly been a threat, and they haven't threatened Israel per se. They're not peaceful. We understand that, but they're not warring in their words. Sorry, Marion, I'll pass it back to you, and then I'll go to Yaakov.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I can see that perspective, but I also disagree. I think Pakistan has come out on several occasions and made claims against Israel. So, I mean, we can both maybe go and Google it and find those talking points and that history there, but I think that it's important to note when we're talking about it and we're framing it the way that we are, the inconsistencies and the discrepancies is where it lends itself to why now, what's at stake, are we missing the forest from the trees? And that's the position that I'm taking from it. It has nothing to do with my personal beliefs and my alliances or my allegiances to any one side. And it's just from a pragmatic perspective here, when I look at the implications of it domestically in terms of the U.S., right? I said in the beginning of this, I'm putting my U.S. hat on this. For me as a voter, as a taxpayer, I look at this and I do question the inconsistency in terms of principle when it comes to saying that this is a threat.
Bro, can I get in the queue? So, AJ down here.
AJ, absolutely. Thank you so much. AJ, I'm really glad you came up here. I was trying to get you up here a little bit earlier. I'm going to pass the mic over to Yakov, who is, I think you wanted to ask a question.
You made my point that Iran is actively funding Hezbollah, which has been firing 10,000 missiles from October 7th beyond into Israel, and prior to that, many thousands of missiles. The Houthis with their ballistic missiles and Hamas. So it's just not a fair comparison, I think. There may be rhetoric from Pakistan, but there isn't active funding to topple the government of Israel.
You mean apples aren't the same as oranges?
Thanks, appreciate it. AJ, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Great, thanks for having me. Listen, it's always difficult to ascertain folks' motivations and where they're coming from, and all I can do is assess the words that are being said. And I have to say, this issue hits close to home for me, and I don't want to say Mariam is for IRGC, but Mariam, all of your comments happen to conveniently align with IRGC interests. You might say you're not anti-regime change, but that you're very careful in your wording not to say that you would support it, and you spend all of your time on this app talking about the dangers of toppling this theocratic, oppressive regime, and then when the topic of nukes come up, you draw false equivalences, and you very cleverly kind of open the door to people being more open-minded about the mullahs having a nuke. Okay, yeah, the program is so peaceful. The Iranian nuclear program is so peaceful that they buried one of their nuclear sites 100 well below cave, and even though that they were bound by an IAEA agreement in 2003, they only revealed that they had the Fordo site in 2009 after it was discovered by Western intelligence. Iran is actively funding proxies, the Houthis, the Hezbollah. They had a hand in October 7. They celebrate Death to Israel and Death to America Day, and the reason even if you had some argument that they were equivalent to Pakistan, that's still, your argument falls apart, because if there's an opportunity to prevent another one of these countries from acquiring a nuke, it doesn't mean you allow it because another country already has it. That argument doesn't make any sense.